1739, Venice, Italy. Antonio Vivaldi is frantically preparing a performance of one of his operas when he is summoned before an envoy of the Catholic Church, who delivers devastating news. Vivaldi has been officially banned from Ferrara, the city where the opera was to be performed. The reason? Vivaldi should be fulfilling his duties as a priest instead of mingling in theater. There have also been scandalous rumors that the young, beautiful star of the opera was romantically entangled with Signore Vivaldi. Despite Vivaldi's insistence that their relationship was purely a professional one, he was still banned from being in Ferrara to oversee his opera. Vivaldi furiously rejected the idea of letting anyone else direct his opera, writing to one of his patrons, "The opera cannot be done without me, because I will not entrust such a large investment to someone else." Little did Vivaldi know that a couple of years later, he would die in poverty, his music almost completely forgotten. Fast forward almost 200 years to 1926. A monastery in Italy decided to sell some of its old documents. Among them were 14 volumes of Vivaldi's compositions. Their discovery, combined with new technology such as the long-playing record, spawned a renaissance of Vivaldi's music. Within a few decades, Vivaldi's music was being recorded and performed around the world, and its popularity has only grown since. In fact, you've likely heard at least one of Vivaldi's compositions. For instance, some of the first commercial cell phones had a pre-installed ringtone featuring a Vivaldi tune. Vivaldi's music makes a cameo in a Simpsons video game. Several commercials, TV shows, and movies have used Vivaldi's music. It has even appeared in the Guinness Book of World Records. More recently, you might have heard Wednesday Addams playing Vivaldi on her cello. But what is it about Vivaldi that makes him and his music so important and fascinating? Come with me as we discover that and ask, who was Antonio Vivaldi? This video will be divided into 3 main sections: a short biography, the importance of Vivaldi's music, Vivaldi's most famous and influential works. I hope you find this video both engaging and entertaining. My hope is that this video will spark more interest and curiosity surrounding the life and music of Antonio Vivaldi. Antonio Vivaldi was born in Venice, Italy in 1678. At that time, Venice was the perfect place for a young musician to learn everything there was about music. Not only was Venice one of the wealthiest places in all of Europe, it was also one of the most influential and important cities for the arts. 7 opera houses existed in Venice during Vivaldi's childhood, including the first opera house to open its doors to the public. Elaborate religious music was also performed in impressive and ornamented churches, such as St. Mark's Basilica. Music was everywhere in Venice, an almost magical city built on a lagoon with canals instead of roads. Young Antonio's formal music education began through his father, a gifted professional violinist. Through his father, young Antonio was able to meet and learn from some of the best musicians and composers of the late 1600s. And Antonio was talented enough to play in concerts alongside his father as young as 12. A sickly child who suffered from what we think was a severe form of asthma, the choice to train young Vivaldi on the violin was likely motivated by that illness which plagued Vivaldi his entire life. By the age of 15, Antonio began studying to be a priest. Becoming a priest would provide young Vivaldi with a thorough education, greater career opportunities, and avoid any labor that would exasperate his medical condition. It is surprising that more famous composers didn't come from Venice, as it's still famous today as a musical city where gondoliers serenade as they navigate the canals and lavish festivals fill the streets with live music. After a decade of study and preparation, a 25-year-old Vivaldi took holy orders and became a priest of the Catholic Church in the year 1703. With his striking red hair and status as a priest, Vivaldi began being known as Il Prete Rosso, or the Red Priest. Around this same time, he was hired at the Ospedale della Pietà as a violin teacher. The Ospedale della Pietà was one of 4 state-supported convents that also housed and cared for orphans. The ospedali taught the orphan boys a trade, and the females were often trained in music. Even before Vivaldi was born, these ospedali were already famous for their highly skilled and eloquent musical performances that were carried out by the all-female ensembles. Vivaldi would work at the Ospedale della Pietà in some form over the next 30 years, not only teaching violin, but also composing music for the girls of the Pietà to perform. This provided Vivaldi a platform to write abundant amounts of music for many different groups of instruments and vocalists. The concerts performed at the Ospedale della Pietà and its accompanying church drew crowds from all over Europe. Even the local opera singers began attending some of the concerts in admiration of the expressive and compelling singing by Vivaldi students. Charles de Broze, a French scholar and politician, wrote a letter in 1739 describing how the best music can be heard in Venice, that the girls of the Ospedali sang like angels and played with great skill on various instruments such as the violin, flute, organ, oboe, cello, and bassoon. One of the girls in Vivaldi's orchestra, a violin virtuoso known as Anna Maria della Pietà, performed many works that Vivaldi composed specifically for her. She would succeed Vivaldi as the violin teacher and even compose some music herself, working at the Pietà the rest of her life. One might ask why Vivaldi, an ordained priest, was so busy making music with young women instead of performing sacraments and other duties appropriate to a clergyman. In a letter Vivaldi wrote in 1737, he explained that while he had performed the Mass for about a year, his ill health prevented him from doing it effectively. Some have speculated that Vivaldi used his condition as an excuse to pursue his true passion of music. Vivaldi would still wear red priest garments during his life, despite his departure from performing clerical duties. While the Ospedali provided Vivaldi a means to write, perform, and have his music played by some of the most skilled musicians in Europe, the prestige and pay were quite modest. With his father essentially acting as his manager, Vivaldi not only began composing operas, but organizing and investing financially in them as well. The term for a person who organizes and sometimes finances operas is an impresario. Think of an impresario as someone similar to a record or movie producer today. While Vivaldi found great success as a composer and impresario of opera, it was not without its fair share of struggles. In 1715, one of Vivaldi's operas faced censorship due to its plot featuring a woman falling in love with another female who was pretending to be a man. Vivaldi would sometimes lead the operas, performing on the violin, as he was still most famous for his virtuosic, impassioned violin playing. When he moved to Rome in 1722, Vivaldi was invited to play a private solo concert for the Pope. Remember that story from the opening of this video? Those events, combined with the death of his father and de facto manager a few years before, meant it was becoming increasingly difficult for Vivaldi to maintain his status as one of the most celebrated and successful composers in Western Europe. In 1740, Vivaldi, who was 62 at the time, would move to Vienna, Austria, in hopes that the Emperor, Charles VI, would hire him as a court musician. The emperor had previously been so enamored with Vivaldi's music that he had gifted him a gold medal and may have even promised him a job. Unfortunately for Vivaldi, the emperor unexpectedly died shortly after Vivaldi arrived in Vienna. Making matters worse, most of European society no longer favored the Baroque style that Vivaldi had helped to perfect. Only 1 year after arriving in Vienna, at the age of 63, Antonio Vivaldi died. Despite all the fame and wealth in his golden years, a poorly attended pauper's funeral was all that could be afforded for the great master. For one that gave the world so much gorgeous music, it is painfully ironic that no music was played at Vivaldi's funeral. This marble sign on the University of Technology in Vienna was placed there in 1978 to commemorate Vivaldi's 300th birthday. It marks the former site of the graveyard where the Red Priest was laid to rest.